Hello, the life after 60. Your companion on the journey to recovery of body, mind, and soul. Today I want to share the story of a man who lived with his stomach as if he were living next to a ticking time bomb. Every meal was a battle filled with caution, anxiety, and even fear. This is the story of Hans, 75 years old. For 20 years, Hans lived with chronic stomach pain, bloating, dull, aching abdominal tightness, a burning sensation after meals, prolonged digestion, and sudden waves of nausea, sometimes even in the middle of a walk. He was diagnosed with chronic gastritis, stomach atrophy, and tested positive for H. pylori. Every year, he went through 3 to 5 rounds of antibiotics. People eat for joy. Hans ate to survive. His family remembers clearly for 2 decades, no matter who cooked, the first question he always asked was, "Is this too tough to chew?" He no longer savored food. He no longer chewed properly. He simply swallowed and waited for the stomach to react. His daughter once said, "Dad's turned into a wind-up machine. You just feed it in and it breaks down slowly over time." I met Mr. Hans during a workshop on aging and digestive health. He didn't speak much. He just looked around and said, "I've finished all the pills. Now I just want to eat like a normal person again." It sounded simple. But for someone who had lived in pain with every bite for 20 years, that dream was bigger than paying off any debt. And that dream began with a single spoon of porridge. With one quiet moment, where he finally sat face to face with his stomach, not with frustration, but with patience and presence. 3 kinds of medicine, and not once did they heal him. For 20 years, every visit Mr. Hans made to the hospital ended with a new prescription. First, it was antacids. They brought relief for a few days, but when he stopped taking them, the acid reflux returned. Even worse, then came proton pump inhibitors, strong acid blockers. The doctor said to use them for no more than 4 weeks. Mr. Hans took them for 3 months. Then came the antibiotics for H. pylori, 2 rounds a year, yet the bacteria never fully disappeared. Each prescription grew longer. Every follow-up visit meant another list of pills, and instead of healing, his stomach grew more and more exhausted. At first, it was a dull ache, then a burning sensation, then stabbing pain, then nausea. Some days he would sit silently in a corner, no food, no words, just trying not to feel his stomach clench any tighter. His daughter once asked Dad which medicine worked best for you. He gave a dry laugh. Every medicine worked for the first few days, then the magic faded, but the pain never did. I met Mr. Hans again at a routine checkup just after he had finished his 17th round of antibiotics in 7 years. His hands trembled. His lips were pale. His eyes no longer had the same light, but he still showed up, because he still wanted to find a way even if the hope was thin. At that point, he wasn't wishing for a cure. He just wanted to eat a bowl of porridge without nausea, to chew a bite of rice without dreading the ache that would come that night, to finish a meal without curling over in pain, lying on his side just to feel less miserable. I looked at him and suddenly understood some pain doesn't need to be intense to break a person. It just needs to be relentless, and slowly and soon, it wears them down. Because the medicine no longer worked, Mr. Hans returned to something incredibly simple. 1 spoonful of thin brown rice porridge, soft, unseasoned. He chewed it 30 times, then he waited. No more pills, no more thoughts, just listening to what his body would say. For the first time in years, his stomach didn't react. And in that quiet moment, he realized maybe it wasn't more medicine he had needed all along, but more listening. The doctor said, "You don't need more medicine. You need to start eating from the beginning." At his most recent follow-up appointment, the doctor looked at Mr. Hans for a long moment after reviewing his endoscopy results. Then he closed the folder without prescribing any more medication. He looked up and with a slow, deliberate voice said, "Mr. Hans, I'm not giving you any more pills, because no medicine will work if you don't change how you live. You don't need more medicine. You need to start eating again from the beginning. Strangely, those words didn't make Mr. Hans feel offended. Instead, he felt relieved, as if someone had finally admitted what he'd suspected all along. That everything until now had been patchwork, not healing. The doctor handed him a piece of paper. But it didn't list prescriptions. It listed instructions. Thin brown rice porridge, steamed vegetables, warm water, chew 30 times per bite, no eating after 6 p.m., and one gentle reminder: don't look at your meal as a pit to fill. See it as an opportunity to begin again. Back home, Mr. Hans didn't go to extremes. He didn't cut everything at once. He began replacing little by little. Breakfast, thin brown rice porridge, sesame salt. Lunch, soft rice, boiled vegetables, a small portion of steamed soybeans. Dinner, lotus root soup, a slice of steamed sweet potato, warm water. No alcohol, no coffee, no meat, no conversation while eating. And most importantly, he chewed carefully. At first it felt bland. The food was plain, but there was no pain. By day 3, he felt lighter in his belly. By day 7, he no longer had to lie on his side after meals. By the second week, he started feeling hungry at the right times, a sensation he hadn't felt in 15 years. I'm called to ask, how are you feeling? He replied, I haven't seen any miracles, but at least my stomach has stopped fighting me. And for the first time, it feels like a friend, not an enemy. Maybe Mr. Hans wasn't fully healed yet, but he had begun. By returning to the one place where everything truly starts, the way he eats. The journey to slow eating began with a single spoon of porridge. The next morning, Mr. Hans lifted the lid off his clay pot and scooped a spoonful of thin brown rice porridge into a bowl. A gentle steam rose. The soft aroma of roasted brown rice filled his small kitchen. No oil, no salt, no seasoning, just rice and water cooked with patience. He sat down, no rush. He didn't turn on the TV. He didn't touch his phone. He placed the spoon on his tongue and began to chew. For the first time in his life, he counted the number of times he chewed. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 30. The porridge softened. His saliva mixed naturally with the grains. He didn't force the swallow. He let his body decide when it was ready. And then, something strange happened. After that very first spoonful, his stomach didn't fight back. No burping, no bloating, no cramping like it always had before. A surprising peace, one that didn't come from any miracle food, but simply from how he ate. He continued with the second spoon, then the third, and eventually the entire bowl. He had never felt so still after a meal. It felt like he had just finished a meditation session, not breakfast. From that day on, Mr. Hans chose to eat slowly. Not because someone told him to, but because he never wanted to return to the chaos he used to feel after every meal. Slow eating was no longer a technique, it became a way of living. I'm called after a week and asked, does food taste better when you eat slowly? He smiled and replied, not really. But my body isn't afraid anymore, and to me that's the best flavor of all. Mr. Hans's healing journey didn't begin with a prescription. It began with a single spoon of porridge and one simple decision: to stop swallowing in a hurry. I chewed 30 times per bite, and for the first time I didn't feel bloated. Mr. Hans had heard people say you should chew each bite at least 30 times. But for decades he never once counted. Eating for him had always been a fast mechanical routine, a duty to prevent hunger. And after every meal came the same fear. When will my stomach start hurting again? But now he decided to count for real. That day's meal was simple soft brown rice, steamed pumpkin, a bit of boiled mustard greens and sesame salt. No oils, no spices, nothing heavy. He chewed each bite of rice exactly 30 times. He set his chopsticks down after each mouthful. No rush, no glancing at the clock. And what happened next, he couldn't believe. After the meal, he stood up and walked a few laps around the house. No bloating, no heaviness, no tightness in his chest or urge to lie down. His body was quiet, but not the sluggish, uncomfortable quiet he used to know. It was a peaceful silence. Mr. Hans began to enjoy that feeling, a sensation he once believed he would never have again. The feeling of eating without pain, of digesting without consequences. He wrote in his journal, "For the first time, eating felt like true joy, not because it tasted good, but because I wasn't afraid." I'm called and asked, "Do you feel a clear difference?" He replied, "Yes, absolutely," before I swallowed like a machine. Now I chew as if signing a contract with my stomach. I tell it, "I won't hurt you anymore." And from that moment, meals stopped being a habit. They became an apology. A process of healing between him and the body he had neglected for so long, because for years he had believed that medicine alone was enough. Rice soup and silence. There was something Mr. Hans had never truly considered before. Eating also requires space for food to reach the body, and space for the body to truly be present with the food. In the past, his meals were always accompanied by noise, the TV clinking chopsticks, casual chatter. He ate in a hurry, with his eyes fixed on the news, with his mind somewhere else. But now, everything had grown quiet. He set out a simple meal. A bowl of brown rice, a bowl of soft-cooked vegetable soup, and steamed tofu sprinkled with black sesame. No phone, no program, no conversation, just him and the meal. When he lifted the first spoonful of soup, he paused for a few seconds. He inhaled deeply, let the steam warm his face, and only then brought it to his mouth. The soup was sweet not because of seasoning, but because his heart was calm. Eating in silence, Mr. Hans realized something. For the past 20 years, he hadn't truly eaten. He had only consumed to survive. Consumed out of fear, out of routine, but never with respect, never with gratitude. Each spoonful of soup a breath, each bite of rice an opportunity for healing. And the silence a space where he and his body could finally meet again. I'm called and asked, "Don't you get bored eating this way every day?" He replied, "No. I feel like I'm learning to live again, starting from the meal." And from that day on, Mr. Hans kept a new habit. Eating in silence. Not because of religion, but because it was the only way he could truly hear his stomach and the quiet voice of his own soul. No food after 6 p.m. And my stomach began to be grateful. Mr. Hans used to have the habit of eating dinner late, 7:30, sometimes 8, even 9 p.m. Still holding a bowl of rice with broth, adding slices of cold meat. Not because he was hungry, but because all his life he had been taught a full stomach at night helps you sleep better. But sleep never came. Only nights of bloating, waking up with acid reflux, and restless hours, curled up hands gripping his stomach. After switching to a macrobiotic diet, he decided to try eating earlier by 6 p.m. A light meal. No oil, no strong seasoning, and most importantly, no rushing. Just a bowl of thin porridge, some stewed vegetables, and a cup of roasted brown rice tea. That first night eating early, he had no expectations. But surprisingly, he slept for 4 straight hours without waking. And the next morning, his stomach didn't feel like a stretched-out drum. By the 3rd night, he slept deeper. By the 5th night, he no longer needed to turn on the light in the middle of the night just to walk to the bathroom, heavy with discomfort. After 2 weeks, he wrote in his journal, "I don't know if it's the early dinners or something else, but I feel like my stomach is grateful. It's no longer resisting, no longer reacting. It's cooperating." Eating early seemed like a small change. But for Mr. Hans, it was a way to give his body back its right to rest in sync with its natural rhythm. No longer forcing digestion during sleep. No longer making his body work when the whole system needed to wind down. I'm asked, "Do you feel deprived eating so early?" He shook his head. "Not at all. I feel free, because I know my sleep is no longer the price I pay for a late meal." And from that day forward, 6 p.m. became his stopping point. Not out of restriction, but because he knew. The moment he paused, his stomach began to be thankful. No more medication, just warm tea and listening to my peaceful stomach. 6 months ago, if anyone had told Mr. Hans that he could live without a single stomach pill, he would have laughed. Not out of belief, but out of despair. His body had become so dependent on medication, like a pillow under his back. Something he couldn't live without. But now it had been over 3 weeks since the last time he took an antacid. His stomach didn't hurt. No acid reflux, no gnawing sensation, no more subtle burning when walking too long or lying on his left side. Instead of pills each morning, he drank a cup of warm water with a few slices of ginger. Each night, a small cup of roasted brown rice tea. No sugar, no milk, no stimulants. And then he would just sit quietly. He sat not to fall asleep, but to simply listen, to his stomach at peace. That's the word he used, peace. Not healthy, not pain-free, not cured, just a feeling, no tightness in the belly, no pounding in the chest, no burning in the throat, a steady breath, eyes closing naturally. I asked him, "Why don't you need the medicine anymore? Why isn't there pain?" He replied, "Because I've stopped hurting it. I don't force it to work when it's meant to rest. I don't pour heat into it when it needs to cool down. I don't eat when I'm angry. I've learned to let my stomach live as something that also feels." No doctor had ever told him that, but he had learned it through his own body after hundreds of episodes of pain. And for the first time in his life, he didn't need medication. He just needed warm tea and silence. The last meal of a man who feared food, and the meal that opened a new life. There was a time when Mr. Hans said something that left everyone around him in slumber. "I'm not afraid of hunger. I'm afraid of eating." Every meal felt like a gamble. Would it end in burning pain or acid reflux? Would he be able to lie on his left side that night? Would his stomach stay tight and swollen until morning? But then on that morning, he sat in front of a meal as simple as every other day: brown rice porridge, stewed red beans, and soft vegetable soup. And in one quiet moment, he realized he wasn't afraid anymore. He no longer saw food as a threat. He saw it like an old friend, one who had been angry for a long time for being treated the wrong way. And now they were finally making peace. He picked up his spoon and scooped the porridge. No trembling hands, no held breath, no waiting for the stomach to protest. He simply ate gently, mindfully, with trust. I once asked him one quiet afternoon, "If you could go back, what would you change first?" He replied, "I would start eating the way I eat today 30 years ago." For Mr. Hans, the last meal of a man who once feared food became the very first meal of a new life. A life no longer ruled by pills, no longer avoiding dinner, no longer waking up with a dull, aching belly. All that was left was a man who had learned how to eat, how to live, how to be grateful, and who finally understood rebirth can begin with the very meal you once feared the most. I learned to eat again like a man who's learning to live. 1 year later, Mr. Hans no longer visited the pharmacy. He no longer searched through health forums, no longer curled up in pain after a meal. Instead, each morning he stepped out into his garden to water the vegetables, take a few deep breaths, and prepare breakfast slowly with his own hands. Brown rice, steamed vegetables, a few black beans, warm tea. He ate slowly, he chewed with care, he didn't rush a single sensation because he knew every mindful bite didn't just nourish his stomach. It healed the part of his mind that had been in turmoil for years. His doctor said, "I didn't think you could recover like this just by eating differently." And he replied, "I didn't just eat, I came back to life." I once asked him, "How do you feel now?" He answered, his voice calm, like morning light. "I'm not as strong as I was in my youth, but I live more truthfully than I did 30 years ago, because now I live each moment fully, starting from the first bite of the day." Mr. Hans didn't do anything extraordinary. He didn't take secret herbs. He didn't follow some mysterious doctrine. He only changed one thing the way he ate, and that one thing changed the rest of his life. If you're in pain, if you're afraid to eat, if you're exhausted from medications, try stopping, sit down, and slowly eat just one spoonful of warm brown rice porridge. Maybe you won't notice anything right away, but just like Mr. Hans, you might begin to feel your body forgiving you little by little. Subscribe to the Life After 60 so you won't miss healing stories like this one. Because true health doesn't come from magic. It comes from the small things you choose to do every day with kindness towards yourself. And if a 75-year-old man who once feared food can now sit and smile with a simple bowl of porridge, then so can you, starting today.